Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on allyship in the workplace. My name's Amanda McNamara. I'm the Senior Delivery Partner at Chwarae Teg, working on the Agile Nation 2 business programme. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome author and entrepreneur Bernie Davies. Bernie is with us today to help us to explore what allyship in the workplace means and to help you to look at your personal privilege and how you can make a difference. So to just give a little introduction to Bernie, to give a little introduction to Bernie is very, very difficult. So she has a string of achievements and awards. So I'm just going to take some time to highlight a few of those for you. So the first one was in 2020. Well, not the first one, but the one I'm going to highlight first was in 2021. Bernie was winner of Women in Business 2022, Speaker Award winner. Diversity and Entrepreneur Leader. Bernie was the first Black woman to be given the public appointment of advisory panel. She's an independent member for Public Services Ombudsman for Wales, a Welsh Government Accelerator Coach. And on United Nations Human Rights Day 2022, Bernie was awarded the really prestigious title of Ambassador for Peace by the Universal Peace Federation. And that was for her work on diversity, inclusion, and equality. In 2017, Bernie was recognized as one of the top 100 businesswomen. In the same year, she received the Excellence in Business Award at the Senedd. In 2018, she was recognised as Swansea's Black Icon. And for 8 years, Bernie operated three restaurants. And in 2019 was awarded #1 Caribbean restaurant in Wales. And then in 2018 was in the top 100 restaurants in Wales. Bernie recently featured on ITV's Face to Face programme as one of Wales's leading personalities. Some of you may have seen that. And she's just told me as well that she's shortly going to be picking up a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Ethnic Minority Welsh Women Achievers Association. So she's literally due to pick that up very, very soon. So as I said, we're delighted that Bernie is here to help to explore allyship in a little bit more detail. So I won't keep the stage any longer. I'm going to hand over to Bernie.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Well, guys, do you know, that's why I'm so excited and passionate about the whole question of diversity, equality, and inclusion. Because I myself have been a recipient of good diversity, of the application of allyship. And yes, I probably have experienced some of the opposite sides to it. But really, what I'd love us to do right now is relax. Don't worry about all the things you just heard about me. I always say, don't believe your own hype. Because, we are more than what we do. We are who we are. And that's the essence of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And most importantly, belonging. Because, you can actually have people together and you can be diverse and separate. But we want people to be diverse, included, and feel like they belong in that space. So we're going to remove the distractions. Welcome to all of you who've joined us. We're even diversifying in the tech world now in this new era of hybrid delivery. I know you're joining us, some of us from YouTube and some from Facebook. Welcome. So just get your cup of tea. We're going to ground yourself. Let's just make space and room. There are some, technical restrictions. So we might not be able to have that live interactive chat. But what we're going to do is this. There are a couple of times I'm going to ask you to get involved. Drop it in the chat. There's somebody on our team who is monitoring your chats. Then they're going to put it together. And then they're going to get me to have a look at it. So you will be involved as best as we possibly can in this whole process. And then at the end, you're going to be able to have questions answered. So please do throw your questions in your various chat platforms, and let's get about really debunking this whole conundrum called diversity, equality, and inclusion, and allyship. So I'm going to start first by telling you my own diversity and inclusion story, and I'm going to uncover the main source of unconscious bias, which, to be honest, is storytelling. It's how we tell the stories and how stories are received. We're going to discover our own privilege. We're going to discover power, our own power. You'll say to me, yes, what power do I have, Bernie? You have all the power because you are in these various spaces. But there is power in the people. And the power comes from the ground level and swells up and makes a true difference. We're going to learn some allyship actions. And we are going to, I hope, take away from this webinar, seminar, hybrid event, whatever we want to call it, how we can make a difference in our everyday walk. Okay? So my story. You might have picked up that I have a Jamaican accent. Some people tell me I no longer have the accent, but I do not agree with them. I think I still have my Jamaican accent. And so with my Jamaican background, I have my own lived experience with the whole question of diversity, equity, and inclusion. For me, it was par for the course. Our Jamaican motto was out of many, one people. When I grew up, where I grew up in my classrooms, I would have a teacher coming in African dress, another one coming in her Indian sari, another one coming from, all sorts, people coming from Syria, France, all over the world, the USA, all in the same space. All my classmates were genuine people from India, not just of Indian descent, but actual Indians, Chinese, all over. So the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion thing was like I just how I lived. I never understood what it actually meant to have the exclusions. And in fact, I have got to say, it's because of my own personal journey of understanding how important it is, because I had to come to the United Kingdom and I faced my own challenges. And initially, I did not in any way equate any of my challenges to a diversity challenge or to any kind of unconscious bias. And I had to, over time, learn that when someone might put blockages and they might not be nice, it's not just because they're not nice. It's potentially because they're not understanding who you are. They are suspicious of who you are because they have not actually had a chance to sit and talk, converse, get to know people from your culture. All they've actually heard is stories about people from your culture. Yes? So this lady on the screen that you see there, her name is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And she has a very, very famous TED Talk. Some of you might have heard of it. And her TED Talk is The Power of a Single Story. And I put it to you that all of us are in some way or the other affected by the single stories about different types of people that we hear every day. Now, just think with me for 1 minute. We are here in the South Wales context, Southwest Wales. I'm not sure how far away you are who are listening, but we're here in the Southwest Wales context. So we know that we have these things about what we think about people from the valleys, certain valleys, what we think about people from Newport as opposed to Cardiff, what the Swansea people think about Cardiff people, what the Cardiff people think about Swansea people, what we think about the redheads as opposed to the blondes and the brunettes. We know that even within the white context, there is division. And that division finds its root in the stories that we hear that have come through generations from the lips of our fathers and our own relatives and our mothers about these certain sects that we actually live and do life with within school and in the universities and in our places of work. We've got to admit that. So I'm really simplifying this whole diversity and inclusion conundrum because we try to make sometimes a great big essay out of it. It's really simple and it's down to perception and attitudes. And we've got to fix that. So Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, she's Nigerian, and she tells in her TED Talk about how she, as a Nigerian, she grew up very, very privileged. She had a houseboy, she had household staff, and all of that. She was, she was living a very, very first class citizen kind of life in Nigeria. And then she went to university in the United States. And when she arrived at the university, her roommate was surprised that she knew who Britney Spears was, that she had all the mod cons, what they had in those days, all of the gadgets. And, she was expecting her to probably be living in the trees because that's the story. Yes. So Chimamanda said, when she realized how she was viewed in the United States, she started to think about how she actually even viewed her own houseboy and her staff from the villages in Nigeria. She didn't consider them to be equal, and she had these perceptions of them. And then she also went to Mexico while she was there studying, and she had to then say to herself, you are no less affected by the power of the single story, because you are surprised now going around in Mexico City and seeing people in Mexico that are looking as affluent as ever and all these fancy buildings and all of what is there. You yourself are surprised. Why is that? Because of what you see on television about the Mexicans who are jumping the walls to come over, and the names they call them, wetbacks and all sorts of things. And then she realized that if we each only say one thing and one main negative thing and repeat that story about any one group of people, any one ideology, any one sexual orientation, any one religion, we then become proponents of a single story that will affect us very, very, very badly and negatively. So I'd like us to consider what single stories are we thinking about each other and the people that we work with. Now, these terminologies, groupthink, information bubbles, unconscious bias, cognitive diversity. I would love if you could put in the group what these things mean to you. But I just want to point out to you the ways in which the single stories can affect these various things. So groupthink is when you have a situation where you are in, whether it's a team at work or it's a group of friends, and you have the group dynamics. We know about group dynamics. We know you have some people are strong, some people, you have in some groups, one has more money than the other, one has a higher position than the other, one's family is more successful and prominent than the other, one is more beautiful than the other, one has all more skills, or they think they do have more skills than the others, which maybe is because they haven't allowed others to flow and soar in their skills. So in that group dynamic, you tend to have those that actually are in charge of the groups, the influences in the groups, whether by holding office or just by natural flow of things because of the way they are. And what the rest of the people in the group do is they take their cue from the influencer. So if you find that the influencer is going to be giving more room to somebody in the group's ideas than the other, if you find that somebody tries to speak and they're told, oh, no, that's okay, we'll talk about that another time. Yeah, we're running out of time, John. Let's talk about that at another time. But then George, chimes up immediately after, and George is given the floor. The message then is sent to John that his point is not that important, and maybe next time he should not contribute. And the message is also sent to the people that are there that George's opinion is really the opinion that we should listen to next time. So we need to be careful, because groupthink is what actually was a big problem in the Bay of Pigs. Yes, it was a big problem with Apollo 13, because the ones who thought, the little voice that could have said, I don't think that's a good idea, did not get heard. They didn't feel that they had the space to speak. And we know what happened. Information bubbles. Now, what's that? Right. Let me tell you, more and more every day, we all live in information bubbles by default, more often than not on purpose, because nobody wants to be in a little bubble where they only hear, see, understand, and speak with people who think and believe and act and look like them. You might think you want to, but you really don't. Because what will happen if you do that is that you are going to get left out of important information. Now, whether you like it or not, or like him or not, that is why Donald Trump was successful. Because there were people who were in their little information bubbles. They were all just speaking and interacting with the people and liking, commenting, sharing the ideas of the people that thought like them. So they thought that Donald Trump did not have any followers. I mean, I know there are all sorts of conspiracy theories, and who says, I don't know what are the other reasons that he came into power. But I can tell you that the fact that people were not getting the information about how much support there was for him was a great factor in that. And I can tell you something else. I challenge you to take this test. You take this test of three or four of you at the same time, three different sets of types. So like, for example, I've done it. So for me, if I were to go on social media, on Google now, and type in a particular topic at the same time as my upwardly mobile yuppie daughter who's in her 30s, yes, and my conspiracy theorist 40-year-old son, if he heard me now, he'd kill me. If the three of us typed in the same topic at the same time on Google, we are going to get three different sets of search results. I challenge you to do that, and you will see what I mean. There is no question about the fact that Google and the bots feed us what they think we want to eat. I think I'm seeing a question here that has come up. Yes, thinking environments can help guard against groupthink. Absolutely, James. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Because if we don't create a thinking environment that is going to actually encourage us to understand and hear and find room and space for other ideas, we are going to be caught and imprisoned in our own mutual admiration society, which will not help us. So we've got to encourage us to engage with others that don't think like us, think and feel and look and act like us. Yes, very, very, very important. Yes, cognitive diversity. What does that mean? Right. Okay. So we know we talk about neurodiversity, and we understand that people are neurodivergent, and this is about allyship, so I'm not going to go into. But we don't think about the cognitive diversity that we have, because people have certain talents, they have ways of doing things, ways of applying certain strategies. But if we are going to only encourage people in teams that are going to think the way we think, want to approach a conundrum the way we approach it, to come up with the same kind of disruptive thinking, without even disruptive thinking to us is not a positive term. If that's how we want to think and be, we're not going to get the best out. So absolutely spot on, Nancy. Thank you for that. Awesome. Right. Okay. So let's move on a bit. Right. So let's talk about allyship, because that's what we really have. Because all of that is a background, right, to show you the difficulties that we can have. And then what we want to talk about now is what's the one overarching tool that we can use and that we must use to combat unconscious bias, the single stories that we tell, groupthink, information bubbles, and such like, what it is. So now, allyship. When you hear about inclusivity and allyship, what do you think of, right? Let's get that in the chat, and then we'll talk about that. Fantastic. So essentially, it covers every possible thing that you can think of, but we don't think of. Our everyday interactions. In our everyday interactions, where we meet people, whether it is that we go networking, whether it is that we are in our offices, whether or not we are running a charity, whether or not we are working in a bank, whether or not we're overseeing a multiplicity of sectors. Like, for example, I'm on the advisory panel for as an independent for the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. And we have the remit to oversee all the complaints that come through about all of the public sector, including the Welsh Government. That's a huge remit. And I am so thrilled that I was invited to join that panel because of their focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And even in that context, it is an everyday challenge to actually ensure that the people who are coming to or who need the services find us to be accessible, find the websites to be speaking the language that they need to speak, to let us feel that we can actually make a complaint and that our complaint will be taken seriously. So how we deal with the phone calls, how we deal with the emails that come in, how we deal with the letters, how we deal, it's very important how we hire, how we recruit. There are several organizations that I work with in terms of training and to support. Tech, incredible work on gender equality, representation, women feeling safe in the workplace, women having a place and a space that they feel safe as well in terms of how they are able to live their lives. Fantastic work. But how are they going to effectively do this? By working with stakeholders, partners, with the people that they work with and they train, like this kind of event, to actually help people to understand the importance of how you hire. Because if you're going to have a culture that wants to promote allyship, which is simply being the responsible person who ensures that everybody in the workplace, first of all, the workplace is comprised of multiplicity of people, a diversity of talent, a diversity of culture, a diversity of views, creed, opinions, cultures, and that each one is given the same safe space. They feel as if they are heard, and the behaviors of other people within the teams are monitored and rewarded. There is mentorship that goes on, and there is proper representation of people who would be able to mentor in the way that we need each individual to be mentored, each individual group to be mentored, because people come with different experiences. They come with different needs, They come with different social and societal stigmas. They come with different senses of privilege, different senses of what is power. So it's understanding that. Who are we giving the advancement to? Who are we giving the recognition to? Is it only one type? Who gets a chance to lead and take meetings and host meetings? Is it only one type? So these are the things that we have to look at. And I am really excited. Let me see what's happening here. Listening to others' experiences. 100%, Laura, listening to other people's experiences. Do you know why listening to other people's experiences is so important? Because understanding is the first step. It was as if you knew exactly what I was speaking about, Laura. Exactly. How are you going to understand if you don't listen? How are you going to know what the needs are if you don't hear? How are you going to make that difference if you do not know what that difference is that needs to be made? It is important as allies that we help the traditionally marginalized to feel important. Others step up. We get the culture shifts that we need. Yes. And do you know what will happen? If we don't do all of that, we will think we are achieving. We will think we are doing better. But in fact, we are failing to do so. So if you look at my slide here, I have a graph of a report in leanin.org, McKinsey and Company. They did a report in 2020. And what they said in the United States is that 63% of white employees saw themselves as allies to women of color. But in fact, the actual employees did not really think so. 16% of the Latinas, they thought that employees of their race and gender have allies at work. They're the only ones. And 11%. That's compared to 63% of people who thought so. Yes? Then let's look at what's happening. Let's look at this graph. If we can get it bigger, please. Right? So in 2020, we had the 63%. Then in 2021, 77% had the temerity to think that they were doing well. But what are the allyship actions? What are the things that actually mean that you are applying actual practical allyship and actually are making a difference? Here they are. So 45% of the employees thought that of them educated themselves about the experience of women of color. So we're talking about women here now, right? This is a Quaritech event. We're not separating the men, but there's a focus here on women. So 45% of them educated themselves about the experiences of women of color. 43% publicly gave credit to ideas of women of color. 39% work to confront this discrimination when they see it. 21% advocate for new opportunities. And only 10% are mentoring women of color. So the actual fact is they are not doing the things that allyship action requires, and they're thinking that they're actually doing it. And the reason for that is that they're not asking the pertinent questions. Right? How are you going to identify inequities if you do not know what an inequity looks like to the person that is feeling it? How do you even know about your power to own it? I can tell you, I didn't know that I had power. I didn't see my privilege. So I thought, well, I'm just a Black woman. I'm enjoying life. I'm quite happy. Nobody's really bothering me. If there was unconscious bias, I didn't see it in the beginning, and I didn't understand. I didn't realize that as a Black woman, I stand in a higher position of privilege than a white, disabled, homosexual male. I didn't understand my privilege over people who struggle with their size, with obesity. I didn't understand I had privilege over, people who were of different religion than mine. These things, they just went over my head because I was never involved in the conversation. I wasn't speaking to those people. I was more than hello, how are you? Because they were not in my world. And so what we have got to do is that we've got to place ourselves, bring people into our space like that so we can learn and understand. But then we've also got to put ourselves out there so that people will be able to hear from us and we'll be able to hear from them. We'll be able to start understanding, having conversations, finding out how we can be elements and proponents of change. And when we are in our workspaces, understand the responsibility that comes with that knowledge and that information. So we're going to do a little bit of an exercise, right? And recognizing your privilege. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is work with me a bit, and you are going to write just tick. So for each tick that you're going to be able to place, just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you only have one, then just one. So in other words, I have never heard a colleague make a cruel joke about people like me. If that's you and you've never heard a colleague make a cruel joke about people like you, that's one. So you have one tick. My colleagues don't comment about my culture or religion in ways that make me feel excluded or demeaned. If you can put a click there, then you've got 2. No one has ever asked to touch my hair at work. If you can click that, nobody has ever asked to touch your hair, click 3. But if you only have one, so what I'm saying is you don't have to have one for one, right? Just each time you put a tick, you make that be a number, or just put the ticks and you count them afterwards, whichever is easier for you. Co-workers don't confuse me with others of my race. In other words, we all don't look alike. So if that's it, tick. I rarely hear comments suggesting I'm not dressed professionally enough. Tick if you can. People rarely or never call me emotional when I express my opinion at work. Tick if you can. I can talk about my personal life without feeling like I'm coming out or explaining myself. Tick if you can. And finally, I don't often feel othered by the words my colleagues use. Right? When you say othered, means you feel out of place. So I don't often feel out of place, excluded, or as if I really don't understand by the words my colleagues use. Now, I'm going to ask you then to just count up how many of those you had. How many were you able to tick? And then send through on the chat how many you got to tick. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story that happened. Recently, I was doing a workshop. It was actually at the Quartex Reinvention and Resilience Conference. And we did a workshop on allyship. And I asked that, because I always do this, because I found that it's so interesting. One of the first things it brings out when we do it is quite surprisingly, in a mixed group, more often than not, you find that you have more white people with little or no ticks, which surprised me the first time and continued to surprise me. But no longer does it surprise me. What surprises me is that it's right all the time. Because we think that diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion is only a black, white, disabled, or sexual thing. And I'm here to tell you it is bigger than that. Yes? So in that one, I did it and I said, how many of you can have 8? How many have 4? Whatever. I counted down. And we had 3 people standing up who had about 2 to 3 ticks. That's all they could identify in terms of privilege. And we thought, see, there you go. And as well, we had more majority white. And I carried on speaking. And then a little voice came and her hand went up at the back and she said, Bernie, I couldn't hear anything after you did that. For the last two slides, it's as if I've been having white noise. I've got to ask you, can I just ask you this? What if you could tick none? There was not a dry eye in that room. I had to stop. I had to call her up. And, we all came around her and we gave her space to share. But that taught me it's not just about how many ticks you can have. It's also how many people have not experienced any sense of privilege and have felt completely othered today, when we are so aware of this whole matter of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I don't know how many have come through now, right? Dawn Lyle, she has 8 ticks. So you are privileged, my friend. Lottie has 6. Laura 7. I was sure I was there, Bernie. It was such a poignant moment. I'll never forget being there. Yeah, it was something else. Yes, it was Quartet, and it was something else. Yeah, it was something else. So we have a lot of privilege. So tell me, is there nobody who could only find 2? So we have a privileged group. We have a privileged group here today. So listen now, the challenge is this. If we have most people here today have found themselves to be in positions of privilege, you have got a lot to do. Because with privilege, you have power. And with power, you have responsibility. It is for us who understand our privilege to take the time to make a difference for others, to make room for others, to be the change. So now when we go about in the workplace, if we are in charge, I know Dawn is in charge of so much. And Dawn, I know Dawn personally. So Dawn, for you to take the time to come and learn about allyship, I know that you're already practicing that, and you're going to take more tools, and you're going to do the great job that you're doing even better within the region, for the region. So fantastic. And Lottie, I know you're doing really, really well as well. But listen, there are some of you who have not shown yourself. I know most of you here, I'm preaching to the choir. I'm preaching to people who actually really, really want to make that change. So now we're going to think, how can we make that change? Right? How can we make people in our areas of influence feel like they matter? How can we influence our teams, our staff members, to take on board deliberate acts of allyship? When we meet people at the where we go for water in the lunchroom, when it's time for a lunch break, do we just walk away and not ask this person how can they would they like to join us? Yeah? When we have our meetings, do we always ask the same person to start and the same person to contribute? How do we do that? How do you make that change? How do we start hiring? I commend all the organizations that have been approaching me, so many, I can't say yes to them all, asking me to help them with their boards and to develop a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a time in Wales that things are changing for the better, and we are tooling ourselves and equipping ourselves. And I am so excited about how that will work. But simple ways. Today we don't have breakout rooms, but even in how you do your breakout rooms in future, when you do your Zooms, share the stage, make space for everyone to speak, right? Commit to confidentiality. People cannot feel that they're going to be, having some kind of comeback when they share how they feel. And not just in breakout rooms, but even in terms of when you ask someone, is this okay? How did you find the session today? And they feed back to you and tell you how they felt. But then you tell it to other people. And then what you do is use that information to let them feel that they know, they should never have spoken in the first place. Yes? Try to see things through other people's eyes and don't question other people's experiences. If somebody says this is how they felt about something, Do not think, oh, well, I would not have felt that way about it, so why do you? That's the whole essence of diversity, because we all don't feel, see, think, and do alike, because we didn't all grow up with the same set of circumstances, in the same culture, with the same background, with the same set of lived experiences. And so therefore we've got to make room for that. We're going to make friends, not enemies. We're going to make allies, not exiles. Yes? So I know we coming time, so we're going to try to wrap up as quickly as I can. But as an individual, we have our responsibilities. We need to educate ourselves. You're doing that today. Go to conferences, go to summits, go to workshops, read, think, pay attention, speak to your friends, make room for the conversation, and model good behavior. So if you want to be a good ally, ask yourself, who do I think is a good ally? Get alongside them. Model their behavior. Change your mindset. Support other people. Build little friendships. And within the structure and the framework and the fabric of your businesses and your enterprises, include deliberate acts of allyship and diversity. Right? Create more inclusive meetings. I'm breaking this down for you guys so I can tell you exactly what I mean. Share your pronouns. Use inclusive language. Observe the group dynamics. See who's the one who is not talking, and just say, oh, can we make room for that person? And challenge your bias, like Chimamanda challenged her own bias about the Mexicans. And I have to confess that even I had my own bias about my own mother country, because I had that single story. When I was growing up in Jamaica, all I could see was videos of the Africans with the distended bellies, their breasts hanging down to their waists, and flies on their eyes. And I was just a little girl. I remember as a little girl, and I'm so ashamed to say, but I've got to expose my own self. I remember saying, oh, I'm glad I was slavery, because I didn't want to be born in Africa. The power of the single story. It is real, guys. I'm still alive, and in my age and day, that came out of my mouth as a little girl. So there's still work to be done, right? When people are speaking, don't interrupt them. Give them credit. Make room for all. Share the stage, as I said. Share. There's room for everyone at the table. Ensure accessibility for meetings. I tell you, I've still been going to places where accessibility is not that good. Right? They're all there. Make a note of them. Right? Okay? Prioritize inclusion in work. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's there. You can have a read, and I think you'll get the slides afterwards, because I know we're running out of time and you need to ask questions. But most importantly, communicate your values, not just in word, not just in policies that are on your computers or in your desks, which you show when you're trying to go for funding. I'm talking real now. But share your and communicate your values and share your ideas as a real, living, breathing, everyday part of your business culture, your business strategy, and your business positioning. And also, when was the last time you looked at your website, looked at the tools that you use to communicate, and asked the question, is it accessible? Does it invite most, if not all? How can it invite all if it is not doing so now? What kind of imagery am I using? What's the language that I'm using? What are the colors that I'm using? All of those things create a framework and you ask yourself the question, what framework do I want to create? So I've come to the end now. I've said a lot. I was not able to get as much back and forth, but thank you for those who were able to come through and add. Because all of you, anybody who knows me, know I love the back and forth and the engagement. But sometimes it's sometimes just good to sit and listen. So what I want to leave you with is this. Now is the time. The stage is set. Deliberate diversity should be a priority in your agenda. And if not now, when? And if not you, who? Now is the time. Let's do it. Let's have questions.
Sorry, I think I was muted the whole time there, Bernie.
Right.
I was just saying that thank you for just a wonderful insight there, a journey and an explanation into allyship. And I hope that everybody did that activity because, as we know, it was extremely powerful. And I was in the room with you in that situation you described. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget the power of that moment and the learning that happened
Mm-hmm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
tears that came for us all.
Yeah.
So a question I've got here is how you ensure that allyship is authentic. So you said that, it shouldn't just be that sort of tick box or that for funding. So it's that authentic piece.
I always say to people that you can't fool people all the time. You can fool all the people, but not all the time, because your mask is going to slip one way or the other. We recently had opportunity to witness a mask slipping in a very, very high profile way. I don't know if you heard about the gentleman who was caught saying something uh, on his, and a recording of this counselor was out about what he said. And so he was not really genuinely applying the whole true concept of diversity, equality, and inclusion. And so he was caught saying the wrong thing at the right time. If we are truly committed to deliberate diversity and allyship, at all times, we're going to speak the right language. At all times, we're going to be aware of what's happening. Now, sometimes you can miss it, like that day when I did that exercise and I just asked about who had just 2 or 3. I missed the one who had none. But because I genuinely created a space within which she felt she could speak, think about it. If I somehow and the rest of the group didn't create that safe space that she felt she could stop and open her heart, it would not have happened. So what I'm saying is we're gonna get it wrong sometimes, guys, because we don't know. We're learning, aren't we? We're learning how to understand other people, and the best way to do is to ask questions. But if you say the wrong thing with the right heart, you can fix it. You can fix it. So how do you know that you're applying, that people are genuine? How do you know that you're applying the right genuine, authentic principles? Give it time. You'll find out.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you for that. And going back to that situation, I know it was a very empowering moment for the individual themselves to, as you say, have that stage to be heard,
Yes.
even though it was very difficult, very emotional. After speaking,
Yes.
it was empowering and probably life changing. Yeah.
I know her whole affect changed. She was a glow about her afterwards, wasn't there? It's incredible.
Completely incredible.
Mhm.
So it is, as you say, that sharing, making sure we share the stage and we allow voices to be heard. I've got
Yes.
another one actually, which is about what do you think stops people from seeing their privilege? So if they don't recognise that they can't use that power, then
I think what stops people from seeing their privilege is that they're just in their little bubble. So when you're in your little bubble, you don't know. I remember I had a friend, and she was in university at the time, and she said to me, "I didn't know I was poor when I was growing up." She said, "I didn't know I was poor, Bernie." I said, "I thought that's strange because I think you know rich or poor." She said, "No, because she said in my little world, I mean, we didn't eat fancy food, but we had food. There was so much love. She didn't realize she was poor until she got to high school, and then she saw what all these other rich kids. So essentially, if you just hang out with the privileged people, you don't really understand that you're privileged. And if you do understand you're privileged, what happens is that you think that it's your birthright. So you understand that you're different from the rest, and you think, well, this is how it should be. So unless and until you move outside of that space and you get into another space where you really start to realize what's going on and that there's more outside of yourself, you will not actually appreciate your privilege. And sometimes you get a fall, then you realize your privilege.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I so make some really valid points. Then, as I say, it could be the small circle, but also that sort of maturing and growing up, and actually being more aware of what's going on there. So that's great. So I think in terms of what leaders can do, because we're looking at that in the workplace. What would you say that sort of business leaders, managers can do to help people to identify that privilege?
Exercises like these, I think it would be great to have,
Mm.
and there are some organizations that have monthly uh, sessions where they actually train their staff on the many and varied aspects of the whole diversity conundrum, and in particular allyship. And it's reinforcement of allyship actions. It's actually practically identifying the allyship actions that need to happen within the workspace every day, and making it a part of the conversations that happen in team meetings, being aware and alert to what's happening in the space when you are there, because most offices are open plan now. But then, of course, you also have the drawback of the hybrid working now as well. So you're not really able to see it. But what I do know is that the better organizations and the ones who actually value their employees, and that's growing now significantly, I'm pleased to say, are actually monitoring the well-being of their staff. So if you focus on the health and mental health and well-being of your staff, and you have a strategy and a framework that monitors that, then you are able to pick up on whether or not people are not performing as they should. Who this person has, but why aren't they contributing as they should? Why is this person always late? Why is this person always unwell? Because this whole matter of allyship, it goes to the economy. People don't understand. It goes to your bottom line. If people don't feel like they are welcome, and they feel othered, and they feel frustrated, and they feel unheard, and they feel unappreciated because they do all the work, and then some other person takes all the credit for it, what they're going to start doing is have mental health issues. They start having stress. They say, oh, they have stress, they have this, they have that, and not coming to work. You're losing man hours. But the root of it is not feeling that they belong.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely crucial. And is that belonging piece? And as you say, there's a lot of effort put in then to initiatives to deal with the mental health and the I know the well-being initiatives. But it's really important to remember that root cause. Why are these things
Yes.
happening in the first place? We've got a question here which links to that, which is what as leaders we can do to foster the culture of allyship. So as well as helping people to recognise their privilege, as you say, it's what can foster a culture of allyship.
Fostering a culture of ally. That's a question, yes?
Yeah,
It,
that's a
it's kind of
question.
it's kind of similar to one that you
It
just
is.
asked. But to the culture, it takes us the next step of that is when you recognize this. So the first answer was, how do you detect it? But when you detect it, and if you want to encourage it, is, do you regulate it? Do you reward it? And do you also sanction it? So if people are not behaving as they should, do you have a little word? Come, let's have a little talk with you. I noticed that you did this or the other. I noticed that within your meeting you tend to do this or that. Or I noticed, then you start, and then but you know, it always works. The carrot always works better than the stick. So instead of saying, having the conversation, because sometimes there's a thing called plausible deniability and it gets every time. So it's not about going for, "Oh, this is what I think you did," and then you're told, well, actually you misunderstood. If you just go with the reward, we have reward systems for these very and many acts of allyship, ways in which we see team members being brought on, ways in which we see different talents and skills are being used, ways in which we see various activities that clearly are there to make those people who don't normally